Welcome to this year's annual NACI Young Healthcare Professionals Forum. I am Shayla Higginbotham, and I am a Managing Director within Health Solutions at FTI Consulting. FTI Consulting is an independent global business advisory firm dedicated to helping organizations manage change, mitigate risk, and resolve disputes. We are extremely excited to sponsor this year's annual NACI Young Healthcare Professionals Forum. In today's rapidly evolving healthcare environment, we as leaders must be nimble, strategic, and progressive. Today's speakers will share with you their experiences with crucial conversations in the healthcare environment. I encourage you to first listen to their stories. Second, learn from their experiences. And third, lead going forward in a manner that is impactful to not only your personal career journey, but also the lives of the patients, families, and communities that we serve. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, NACI family. My name is Kesha Kovar. I am the Director of Population Health at Oak Street Health in Louisiana. Today, I serve as your moderator for this conversation. I am so glad that you all are here today. Thank you to the YPC Conference Track co-chairs, Brigitte Cifuentes and Victoria Okere for planning this event. We have an exciting conversation in store with some dynamic healthcare leaders, and we're ready to dive in. Let's first, however, go over some housekeeping items. On the homepage of the platform, your viewing screen can be viewed in full screen mode or in a minimized mode by clicking on the 4 arrows icon located in the right lower corner of your screen. If you would like to ask any questions of our panelists during the session, please utilize the Q&A platform. Your screen must be minimized in order to click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the page, which is where you can then write your question. The audience questions will be received by me, and as time allows, I will ask that to our panelists during our Q&A portion. At the bottom of the page, you will see a platform that offers a chat function. Feel free to offer any public comments to the audience, to reach out privately to a NACI friend. Please don't place any questions, however, in this chat. Whenever you resonate with something our panelists mentioned or found something insightful, press the post icon at the bottom of your screen and drop an emoji to the group. Although we're not in person, we would like to make this session as engaging as virtually possible. Now that that's settled, let's introduce our panelists. Panelists, please give a brief 2-minute background to our audience. We will first start with Laura Duncan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Laura Duncan. I'm the Executive Administrator for the Division of Endocrinology in the Department of Medicine of UPMC and the University of Pittsburgh. I am so very grateful to be able to participate and share some of my stories and experiences from my career. I have been in healthcare for 17 years now. I have 2 master's degrees, a master's in healthcare informatics, healthcare administration, and I have been a University of Pittsburgh graduate and been a Pittsburgh resident for a very long time at this point. I am so pleased to be a member of NACI. I believe my inception date was 2011. And right now I am the chapter president of our Pittsburgh chapter. So thank you once again for allowing me to participate, and I look forward to working with you all on this panel.
Thanks, Laura. Let's jump to Linda Hines.
Good afternoon. I am also very happy to be with you this afternoon. Again, my name is Linda Hines. I am currently the Medicaid Health Plan President for Virginia Premier Health Plan. I am also a nurse by background. I worked on the provider side at VCU Health System for about 16 years before going over to the health plan. I've had progressive leadership roles there at Virginia Premier, including a vice president of their clinical services, chief operating officer, and chief executive officer before we went through a recent merger. So lots of experience in leadership in different progressive roles. And I am, again, very pleased to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Linda, thank you. Last but not least, Paul Atkins.
Hey, good afternoon, NACI. My name is Paul Atkins, and I'm currently a senior manager at Deloitte in our life sciences and healthcare practice. with human capital for organizational transformation. And it is really because of NACI that I sit where I am today. For the first 10 years of my career at Deloitte, I focused on strategy and operations for performance improvement for healthcare providers to really help transform clinical and non-clinical operations. Later during our discussion today, I can explain more why I moved around to find what really brought me joy in my current role. But after the past 5 years, I've stayed with Deloitte, but within our healthcare practice, I now work within our human capital portfolio, sitting really at the intersection of strategy and operations, along with organizational transformation, helping clients to strategize and consult on how to execute their transformation strategy, but also understanding the impact to those various stakeholders. In addition to that work, I also serve as Deloitte's healthcare practice diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, and I look forward to a very engaging discussion today.
Thank you, everyone. All right, the theme of this event surrounds crucial conversations. So we have a number of topics to discuss for our young leaders. Speak up culture, engagement, and accountability are all very important aspects of organizations and very crucial for the times that we're in now. Can you all recall a time where you witnessed a leader or peer do something you feel is not aligned with your organization's culture? How did you handle the situation? As you can see, we are jumping right into these crucial conversations. So let's start with Paul.
Oh man, I'll share a really great story. So it's not necessarily a manager, but in my work, it was with a client. And this was early in my career where I was still up for promotion and really trying to prove myself and show that I was ready for the next level. And we were going into a sales meeting with a client, and this is with one of the top academic medical centers. And this was, I'm not gonna say their role, but I joked to the client, "Oh, I'm gonna sit next to you for this discussion. Looking forward to sitting next to you for this conversation." And she immediately said, "Well, let me grab my purse and move my wallet to the other side of me, since you're gonna be sitting next to me." And this was the same year that Obama was elected, and in a city that notoriously is racist. And it was extremely hard for me to have the conversation with my job to say, this is a client who's paying a lot of money, but this is how I felt. And I know that it doesn't fit with my values, but also it doesn't fit with our company's values. And we as an organization had to take it up the ladder to our team, but I felt extremely supported in terms of they went to the client, had those conversations, and even had conversations on ending the contract because of those motions. Those microaggressions, and this might have been a macroaggression, really helped shape me in my career and saying, okay, this is a company that supports who I am, and I'm going to stick around and stay here. And since then, I've been at the firm now for 15 years.
It's so awesome that you felt comfortable to speak up. And I think what's even more impactful about that story is that your organization actually did something about it. So thank you for sharing.
Yep, and she got fired a couple of months later.
Oh, good to know. Linda, any thoughts to add?
Sure. I think that, working with sometimes supervisors and managers and our staff, we want to facilitate camaraderie, and sometimes those lines can become blurred between being friends and friendly. And so, I did witness one of my supervisors really being overly friendly and becoming a friend. I think they had some interactions outside of work, but it was inappropriate in the workplace. But really, I saw that as an opportunity to do some coaching and mentoring with a person, and really some role playing, and kind of reverse that to see how would they feel if another person said those things to them. They took it very well and actually helped to develop them, and they were able to move on to other progressive roles and leadership roles throughout the organization, and actually came back and thanked me and said, this was really a learning opportunity. It could have gone in a different direction. It could have been a truly disciplinary action, but I really felt it was an opportunity to do some coaching and mentoring.
Thank you for sharing that. Laura, what about you?
I had a similar situation to Paul, where I was party to something that it was a mixture of gender and racial verbal violence. So the circumstances were surrounding in a prior position, so it wasn't related to my role at UPMC, where the leadership, after being a party and witness to the ugly thing that had been said at the beginning of a meeting to me, were not as, how can I say it, were not as quick to run to my defense, nor were they as quick to understand why I was hurt in the matter after the meeting. So when discussing this with my leader and other people who had been party to it on the team that had witnessed, their response was, "Oh, this gentleman's having a really hard time. Oh, he's just struggling in his life, and it just came out. And be the bigger person, Laura." So I left that organization because for my own well-being, my own sense of self, and also it spoke to, as Paul had mentioned, the organization was not there to benefit me, my whole self. I was there for more than just a paycheck, and they were revealing that they were taking advantage of my expertise and my skills by not recognizing all of me. So I am very grateful that I'm now in an organization where that would not be tolerated. There are systems, policies, and frankly, just professional courtesies to respect the fact that I'm a whole person and I should be respected just by my own humanity.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I hear is the bravery and courage that you had to decide to leave. I know it's very difficult for people when being faced with such situations to know what to do and how to move forward. So kudos to you. Speaking of feeling uncomfortable, can you all share a time where you took on a role that made you uncomfortable? How was it beneficial in developing you as a leader? And I will start this one out. So at my previous organization, I was promoted to a new role. I felt ready for this role. I knew I could kill it, but it still was a challenge. It was a responsibility that I hadn't had before, and I was truly ready to lead a department. And within my first few weeks, people were coming to me with problem after problem. "Hey, Cache, can you help with this? We have an issue here. What's happening with this project?" And, I was thinking to myself, where are the people? Who are all the folks that are meant to be, solving these problems? And I remember getting home one evening, vividly walking through the door, and it just dawned on me that I am the person responsible. And I am so thankful I had that aha moment early on in the role rather than later. And I think now every time I start a new position or take on a new project, I think about that. And even though I may be uncomfortable, I think I'm more mentally prepared to take on that work. So, Paul, how about you go next?
Yeah, no, Cache, I love that story. And it's really, as Malcolm Gladwell said in his book, The Tipping Point, like that was part of your tipping point in your career. And for me, mine came about a year and a half ago where, I never like to get too comfortable in a role or miss those opportunities. And, change is uncomfortable, but you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And about a year and a half ago, when the murder of George Floyd occurred, and Deloitte was really thinking through how do we make sustainable and long-lasting changes within our organization outside of the work that we have already been doing, they asked for me to step up into a leadership role and become the diversity, equity, inclusion leader. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be in charge of over 6,000 healthcare practitioners across the U.S. and India. And in that group, there are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And what does that look like? And yes, I have my own Black experience. Yes, I have my own Black male experience. Yes, I have my own Black gay male experience. But my experiences and lessons learned don't mean that I automatically know everything about DE&I. And so I had to put in the work. It was listening to podcasts. It was listening to webinars. It was talking to NACI colleagues. It was talking to other DE&I leaders and doing that due diligence to say, okay, I'm uncomfortable with where I am now, but I'm developing my leadership skills because I know it's going to make me a better person. And that Cache, very similar to you, was that tipping point of that aha moment of, hey, I don't know everything, but there is this, understanding that you've got to get the work done. And I took that to heart.
Thank you for sharing that. Linda, how about you?
Sure. I think back to a time when it was pretty early in my career in my management journey when I thought I was ready to take on the next leadership role and applied for a position, and I did not get the position. However, I was asked to orient the person who did get the position and train them and teach them. And of course, as you can imagine, initially I was a little upset. And, well, if I'm not prepared to take on the role, why are you asking me to orient this person? But what I realized is there's a big difference between being able to do the task and knowing the job and being able to lead individuals. So I really took that as a learning opportunity to understand, well, why was this person selected for the role? What skills do they have that I don't have? And how can I get those skills? So really, once I got over, myself, so to speak, I realized that, you need to learn from this individual what works, what doesn't work, and what's missing. Do you need some more education? Do you need some more training? Whatever it is, take this opportunity to get those missing skills so you are ready for the next opportunity. And I think that set me on a great trajectory for more progressive roles. But it was difficult at the time.
I can imagine. And I recently heard from someone, rather than asking, what was it about me or why I wasn't selected, ask what was it about that person that stood out to you? Because oftentimes they say, you're great, they can't provide any specific feedback, but they can say what it was about another person that may have stood out. So thank you for sharing that. Laura.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Linda, for sharing that. That's an excellent insight because it helps reveal for me what some of the conversations have been in my journey. It's about feedback and having an excellent network that's going to be honest with you about what is the caliber of your brand when it comes to the work you are trying to accomplish. And for me, the role I'm in now, I've been promoted a handful of times in my time with UPMC, and I have been so blessed to have a group of people who have been part of UPMC for a very long time, who throughout my journey here have been very honest about my output. Sometimes it hurts a little bit to hear that output, to get the feedback, but it's coming from love. And so I have this group of diverse individuals. So one of my largest significant sponsor that I speak to the most, he is a gay white male. He's been in leadership here at UPMC for approximately 30 years. Other individuals, women, certainly other African Americans who have been part of our system, but they're also of different groups. So not all of them are hospital services. UPMC is a diverse institution, so it has a health plan, it has enterprises, a venture capital firm. So I have collected, thankfully, this team that I call up and every 3-4 months go out to dinner, go out to lunch, maybe just drinks and given the COVID period, lots of Zoom or Teams calls, where I'm just talking about what's been going on, some of my work crisscrossing into their space. And they say, hey, Laura, you knocked it out of the park. Be sure to highlight this when you talk to this person. Or, oh, Laura, geez, you really blanked the bed, so to speak. Here's how you can bounce back from that setback. And they have been so key on giving me that feedback so that I can continue to be prepared for what the next step could be.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think all of you have kind of ventured into talking about mentors and sponsors that you all have. Just to continue on that conversation for a minute, Laura, if you could speak to, in more detail, the framework of your network and how have your mentors help you grow and continue to contribute to your professional growth, maybe in addition to the comments you just shared.
Sure. So the framework I would suggest has been natural and it is about fit, because you certainly want to have people that you like. You're going to put the effort forth. You want to be around folks that you do have some sort of a connection to. At the same time, because of their diversity of experiences and because of the diversity of their backgrounds, I feel as though I'm able to get a multifaceted view, because everyone has different perspectives on what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. So I have been intentional of seeking out and broadening my network, and certainly feeding that network as I build those relationships. So even if it's a short text message, given, maybe it's budget season and I'm not able to see a person that I have scheduled myself as a reminder, okay, I'm supposed to reach out to so-and-so, maybe I can't do dinner this month, but I will certainly send a text message and just check in and then be able to see how they're doing. And to the point of it not being one directional, these are relationships. Just like you have family, just like you have partners, it is a give and take. It should be a two-way street. If I'm able to help in some way for one of the projects personally or professionally that they have underway, I want to be there for them, just as they have been there for me. I certainly, when I put my hat in the ring on certain roles or certain projects, will ask for their voice of support so that the mentor can then become a sponsor, given they know my history and what I've been able to accomplish. So hopefully that encapsulates what you're trying to ask, Cache.
Yes, it does. And I love your point about mentors going from mentors to sponsors. Oftentimes we talk about them as if they're two completely separate groups, but you speak to an example where one can be both and shining on one of those roles a little bit more depending on the situation that you're in. Paul, how about you go next?
Man, I'm over here giving Laura a virtual high five because that was, I mean, she hit it on the head. That's exactly, how I've been able to gain my mentors. I will say, when I talked earlier in my introduction around NACI really helped me to where I am today. It was because of Ken Grant as my very first mentor. And I remember in grad school competing in the case competition and going to the NACI conference for the first time, knowing I was applying for administrative fellowship programs. And I ran after Ken Grant, like down the hallway, probably looked crazy at the hotel. And I said, Mr. Grant, my name is Paul Atkins. I'm applying for the administrative fellowship program at Hopkins. I really want to get in. And I will never forget this to this day. And that's why Ken is still my mentor now. He handed me his business card and said, young man, I only give my business card to one person every year. Make sure you use it. And so I reached out to Ken immediately after that, booked a plane ticket to Baltimore just so I could meet him in person, applied for the fellowship program, became the first Black male in the Hopkins Administrative Fellowship Program. But, from that point, took a pause and said, okay, now it's time to bring more in. And ever since then, they've always had people of color in that program. And so, along with what Laura was talking about, it's also if people don't know the difference. There's those mentors and then there's those sponsors. I look at a mentor who advises you as a mentee. Sponsors really advocate for you. So that mentor can be anyone in a position of experience versus I always look for my sponsors to be someone who is rooting for me, yelling for me, pounding the table behind closed doors without me there, and a senior executive leadership program who really have my career vision in mind and can help me get there. So with that, Linda, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay. Well, I definitely agree with both of you on really building that network. And, to the sponsor piece, I think sometimes we look to people who look like us or in our network. And I know being a Black female, sometimes we tend to look to other females or African-American females or whatever your race is. But what I have found in a sponsorship is great to have that. But you also have to have someone who already has a seat at the table, who's going to be able to advocate for you when you're not in the room. And sometimes and oftentimes, that's not someone who looks like you. And so you want to make sure that you include them in your network. I would also say we want to make sure that, it's not just the people that you see right in front of you, but you want to build that network that's national, community. Some people, yes, within your organization, but by building a national network, it helps you to stay in tune with the industry trends, which is really important because you don't want to, whenever you need to have somebody as a sounding board, not just to look at the things that's affecting your community, because oftentimes it's affecting other states, other communities across the country, and you want to be able to learn from them as well. So I have found that I want to cast a wide net with different genders, races, different groups that can really help me along the way and that I can have a dialogue. And, and as Laura said, it is a two-way communication. I need to also be there to help them if they have any questions or anything that I can do to help further their, education or their leadership or whatever it may be. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing. We only kicked this conversation off 10 minutes ago, and I am learning so much, and there are so many virtual affirmations going around, so I really appreciate it. And I want to remind the audience, please, if you all have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. So when trying to grow in a more senior role, shifting the conversation a little bit, you're often tasked with more responsibility. How and when do you approach a conversation about an increase in compensation for the additional task assigned? Paul, let's start with you.
Yeah, so in my role, and this is, I always say this with my team, with my DE&I team, this is kitchen table talk conversation. Like, we're family here, so we're gonna have these open and honest conversations. I have seen in my role within our company that, you know, people of color, a lot of times you will understand the expectations, you will do the roles and responsibilities. You know, like your mom and dad always said, dress for the next role you want, but it goes beyond it. It's not just dressing for it, but you have to demonstrate that you're ready for that next role by doing the roles, by doing the work already in. If you want to become that manager, look to the job descriptions, understand what the expectations are, what the capabilities, skill sets are, and already start demonstrating that. Already put in the work to show that you're ready for that. But what I have found in our company, I think this kind of goes across for most organizations, when it comes time for that compensation discussion, people of color have a very hard time having that conversation. We are so happy that we got this corporate job, that we're in this administrative role. At the same time, we're taking care of mom, dad, grandma, we're paying our tithes, we're doing everything else in here, but you're just happy to have that job. And you have to, that's when you use your sponsors and your mentors, colleagues, other people within NACI to have those open and honest conversations and say, hey, here's where my compensation is. Is it in line? You know, do the research on Glassdoor, look into other opportunities to say, is this where I should be? And don't be afraid to have those conversations. The worst that somebody can say is no. But for people of color, I have found, I would love to hear from others, we just don't have those conversations. And I wish more of us would, because our counterparts are.
Thank you. Laura, let's jump to you.
So to your question of when to ask for more compensation for more responsibility, it's at the same conversation. At least that's what I do. I'm sorry. I love my organization and I love how they've invested in me. And part of the me is pay me for what you're getting out of me. So I have been blessed to be able to do that. And I'm in an organization where the culture is that you show your hunger for you personally and professionally. In order to be ready for that, because it doesn't, when I first started here, I had to learn how to do that. It's practice. Certainly the mentor network, certainly individuals like that who have been around the block for quite a while were able to share, here are the policies, here are the things that are said, here are the things that are unsaid. Here, let's practice. How would you ask? What research would you do related, as Paul had said, locally, but also within the organization, because in some places things are so large that you can't necessarily compare the role that you're performing or some discrete ask or some discrete task that you have to something that may not really be applicable if you're comparing yourself to a competitor. So you do have to weigh a few things, but also recognize that, as Paul said, they can say no. And you need to have your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated ask. So be prepared to say, okay, I will come back to this in a few months because I want to be able to have this conversation because I know that I deserve this given what I've already explained. Or just as they said no, you too can say no. No, this is not an area that I feel I'm going to be able to perform given the compensation and other resources that are being awarded to me for the work. So obviously it is not a black and white kind of circumstance, but you just have to be ready. Because once again, this is about your pocketbook, what you're bringing home to your family. And I mean, for me, I have just a dog, but I like to travel a lot and I need to be able to pay the credit card bills. So UPMC, show me the money.
That sounds great. And Linda, to close with you, we had a question come in from the audience. How do you manage a situation where you believe the organization keeps moving the performance bar when it comes to promotion? So feel free to answer that one along with the previous question.
Well, I think to that particular, I think you need to sit and have real talk with the, whoever is moving the bar. What are the specific performance metrics that you're using to measure, the promotion by? And really hold them to that. Be able to also then be able to evaluate yourself against those metrics and those expectations. When you come back and you feel like you've met those expectations and you meet with them again, but now it's moved again, you have to call it out. and be willing to say, I met with you 2 months ago. We had a discussion about the expectations, the metrics. These are the things that I've done. Has the job changed? Has the situation changed? Because I feel like I have met the expectations. And so, you have to do that versus walking away and talking to your peers about it, because that's not going to get you the promotion. I just think that with asking for compensation, I agree with everything that Laura and Paula said, but you really do need to do your research, because I've had people to ask for additional compensation because they had an extension of their current task or role. Or it's short term. It's something that, you're going to get this project done and it's done. You do it in 1 month and it's over. That's not going to necessarily garner an increase in your compensation. Now, you have to balance all of that. If it's a new project every month and you seem to be the go-to person and you're delivering on the results, then I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration. But again, you have to do your research. You have to have your documentation. You have to be able to communicate that. One of the other things that I will say, I know we're talking about, when to ask for compensation at your current job, but we're in an environment and a role now that, jobs change often. The company changes, mergers and acquisitions are happening. You may find yourself in a position where, your job is coming to an end, and you have to negotiate your separation package. And I will tell you, we tend to, especially females, not to ask for appropriate separation compensation. Again, I learned that, in a previous role, when I found out that a peer who was a male, white male, we did the same similar job, his separation package was better than mine. And when I asked about that, they said, well, you didn't ask. You accepted what we proposed. He negotiated. And so don't be afraid to negotiate if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda, can I jump in for a quick second there? Because I think you shared something that is really powerful that a lot of us also don't do is talking to your peers and asking, well, like, what was your salary increase? How much were you getting paid at this position? How much was your, signing bonus? And I think it's even critical for us as we're thinking through not only just the salary compensation, but being able to be somewhat transparent with people to talk through that, because those are very uncomfortable conversations that for many of us, we just don't have either.
Thank you for sharing that. I personally do that with all of my friends. We have real conversations about that. And how would you know it if you don't ask? And I think to Linda's point, the answer is always no if you don't ask. And the worst that can happen is that they say no. So I think that was some key action items that we all can take after this call and use in our own professional careers. So we are shifting conversations again. I feel like there are so many crucial conversations and hot topics that we can go through, and I'm trying to fit as much in as possible. So two-part question here. Gaining the respect of employees can be challenging, especially for young managers. How did you gain the respect of your employees, and did you experience any barriers? The second part to this is, how can you work with someone, or how have you worked with someone who you may not click with on a personal level? Let's start with Laura.
So first, for the credibility question, it's about building relationships. So understanding where your team's coming from, especially those that may have been rivals. So if you were a peer at some point and then all of a sudden your achievement has surpassed your peers and thus you got the promotion and now that whole team reports to you. That's been a circumstance that I've lived through, and the way to maintain or the way to, for me, professionally grow as a leader while at the same time maintaining or exceeding the expected output of that teams from an achievement standpoint was about building the relationships, being honest, being very transparent. Hey, I understand you may have been trying to go for this role. I'm so glad that I was able to work alongside you and earn and achieve all of these great things that we have done collectively. I want to be able to continue to have that so your story can be told just as well as my success has been. And whether it's maybe the next role that I would have, the subsequent role could be for you as the peer. So if you're a leader, you should be talking about how do you build up your team so that they can achieve just as you have been able to as well. So from a age and different standpoint, that has won me a lot of credibility and frankly largesse as I've grown in my roles across my career. The second part of your question, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. Where were you?
Working with someone who you may not click with on a personal level.
Yeah, yes. So working with folks that you just don't like. For me, it's compartmentalization. So recognizing I need the team to be able to function at a particular level. If this individual is not helping us move to that particular level, have that conversation with the individual in very concrete terms. What's not getting met? What's not being achieved? How is this helping? And what positive things is this person bringing to the table? What negative things is this person bringing to the table that's holding us back? And can we work together on creating an action plan to mitigate the negatives and accentuate the positives? You have to give some time to that, just like with building a career plan for yourself or a career plan for members of your teams. Once again, like I mentioned before about the credibility building, you have to see if folks can rise to the occasion. No, maybe you don't do happy hours or cookouts with the person, but if they're able to get the output that you need, then we can live with that. But if they're dragging us down, the team collectively down, then you have to manage that. And that's managing them out of the team to do something else, or managing them out of the organization if you're at that kind of level.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. Linda, how about we go to you next?
Sure. I think, gaining the respect of your team. One of the things that I found worked well for me is really not asking my team to do something that I couldn't or wouldn't do. Yes, they may do it much better than me because I don't do it on an everyday basis. But, if it's crunch time and we need to get something done and it's an all hands on deck, I'm not above rolling in my sleeves and helping them with doing that. But additionally to that, sometimes we as leaders or managers, we may put processes in place that, they sound good on paper, but when you roll them out, they actually may not work. And once you work with your team or be willing to listen to their feedback, I think you get a lot of respect if you are able to admit, that probably wasn't the best idea. Let me change that. And be willing to admit that versus saying, well, we've put this in place and we're going to continue to do it. Sometimes you do have the bigger picture and it may not be working at that moment, but you have to be able to explain why you're doing that. The more transparent that you can be with your team, I think the more respect you will garner from that. And as far as working with someone that you really just don't get along with, I agree with Laura, you have to be able to compartmentalize. You also have to check your own biases because sometimes, when you feel like they're making your life very difficult, it's easy to always put them in that negative space. And maybe they have a really good idea that they're bringing to the table, but because they're difficult sometimes to work with, you're not hearing that. And so be able to hear their suggestions and evaluate it honestly. But if truly they are bringing the negativity to the team and bringing the team down, you have to address that. And sometimes it is a difficult conversation to help people understand they're not in the right seat on the bus, and you may have to help them to find another bus.
There we go. Paul, we'll close it out with you.
Linda, I'm still in that bus analogy, just so we're clear. I'm taking that one with me to my team. So, and I'm going to act like it was mine. Just in terms of gaining the respect of others, I will say that there is power in sharing some of your struggles at their level, acknowledging the work that they've already accomplished, but also at the same time talking about what you expect in terms of your expectations or exceeding expectations moving forward. To Linda's point, she made a great point around like admitting when you get things right, but admitting when you get things wrong. And there is power in soliciting feedback from your team on what you can do as a leader to be better. At Deloitte, we have the thing called Loop surveys where every 3 to 4 months, you're getting feedback from your team anonymously on what you can do to be better. I've also found power with the teams that I've been managing to encourage them to be their authentic self through their actions. And I think it's important, and Linda talked about this as well, is, be in the trenches with your team. Don't always, sit in this tower where you're not good enough to be in the room with them, doing a deep dive, working through lunch, working on a late dinner to figure out the solutions and being there with them. That's how you create that followership as a leader, and setting those expectations up front, and helping them through their career growth. To your other point, Cache, around, if you don't click with someone, if you can tell from my accent, I live in New York now, but I'm from Texas, and, we always have this saying in the South, Lord bless their heart. And so you want to kind of lead in with that, but I'll say you have to be courageous in having those upfront conversations to just say, look, Laura, maybe we don't always see eye to eye. And can we work through A, B, and C to meet somewhere and be able to work together? And having those conversations could be very uncomfortable, but that kind of pushes a restart to say, okay, how can we work better together? I'm acknowledging that we don't get along. I'm acknowledging that, you did X, Y, and Z to me, but this is not the time to hone in on that. It's how can we move forward and work together, and how can I gain your respect, and how can you gain my respect? And I think that there's power in that.
Thank you for sharing. After this next question, we will jump into the Q&A from the audience. This one, I'm really interested in all of your thoughts. So how do you rebrand whenever needed after you may have failed on a project or made a mistake publicly? Politicians, of course, are very good at this. And I'm curious your thoughts on how this plays out in the healthcare space. Laura, let's start with you.
I think honesty has been the best policy for me. So it's not, you claim it. I mean, okay, so we had an idea and it did not work. Here's what we did as an analysis, like an autopsy of why there's a body on the table, that kind of thing. And as you can tell, I do have a sense of humor about some of these things. But when there is something significant blow up, one has to just be able to acknowledge it, say how you're going to be able to mitigate any of the consequences to the failure, and then move forward. Because especially as the higher you go, the more the individuals who are also achievement oriented and have reached the top of that mountain, they have all sorts of failures in their history too. It's about the bounce back. It's about how resilient are you? It's about how are you still treating folks as you climb up alongside them and be able to say, hey, I can share. I did not do such a great job on this one. So I'm going to tell you about it so that hopefully you can do better and learn from this scenario and not have to repeat the same mistake I did. People see that. And when you're very vocal and transparent about it, that becomes part of your brand. And the respect and accolades just grow from there. So I found that that's been very helpful for me.
Thanks for sharing. Paul, we'll jump to you next, and then Linda.
Yep, very, very similar. I'm going to stick with this medical analogy, Laura. It's, as you're doing that autopsy of what went wrong, begin to understand what could you have done better, figure out those points that, maybe you didn't meet or exceed those expectations. And did you learn from that? So, get feedback, figure out what your next challenge is, take the feedback from where you missed and improve on it and show that you're ready for that improvement. And then I'll say, and then I'll flip it back over to you, Cache, is also talk to your network. There's been many of times where I knew I failed and I just needed someone to talk to. And that was my mentor, my sponsor, to talk through, hey, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what went wrong. Get those words of encouragement, but also get a little kick to say, all right, pull your bootstraps back up and keep going. And sometimes that's what you need to understand, hey, this is what I did wrong, but hey, that word of encouragement to say, all right, well, let me try this again. And this time I'm going to do better.
Thanks. Linda?
So I think in addition to everything that's been being said, you have to be able to show that, yes, you made a mistake. You did the lessons learned, but you don't continue to repeat the same mistakes. You're able to apply those lessons that you learned to other projects. But also you have to show that you're a person that you're willing to take a risk. Sometimes some risks will pay off, sometimes they won't. But I think most organizations appreciate individuals who are willing to step out, take that risk, learn from it, and incorporate all those learnings into the next project, task, job, whatever it is, because that too helps the organization to grow.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have some hot topics that came through in the chat. I first want to mention that a few folks have asked that are these sessions recorded, and they are. You can check with NACI headquarters. However, I imagine they'll be sending some more information about that once the conference concludes. So starting off with the Q&A, someone mentioned, I work in the same system as Laura. And with a promotion, they tend to offer 10% and nothing more. If you have been in the system for a long time and started out low, will you never be paid your true worth because of this cap compensation? How do you address that? Laura, since they work at your organization, I'll pass it to you.
I'll just say 10% is a starting rate. You gotta ask. And frankly, depending on how you're negotiating and what the role's for, and your research, as both Linda and Paul have mentioned before, don't just accept what's pushed across the table. If you want to reach out to me afterward, we can strategize some ideas for moving forward.
There we go. I love that. So seeing as we're all seated at the kitchen table, I like that. I have a hair question. I appreciate the diversity of hairstyles represented even on this call. Curious to hear panelists' perspectives around how much the professional space influences their decisions around hairstyles, natural or otherwise. Length, braids versus cornrows, etc. Any advice they have for Black folks making these considerations? Paul, let's start with you, then we'll go to Linda.
Oh man, well, let me first acknowledge that Black women probably have it the most difficult in these situations. So we can start with me, but then we're going to jump to other people very quickly. I will say that I remember when I first joined, this professional services firm, and you don't know where you're going to go across the country talking to clients and, who you're going to be interacting with. I had a conversation very quickly around, well, Paul, like you shouldn't have a beard or keep it very tidy. You should have your hair a certain length. You should have a fade. We had a lot of those conversations, and it has changed, I would say, with the new generation coming in and just kind of like the awareness of our culture. That I am starting to see that change more and more. There's still an aspect of looking professional, but I think the definition of professional has changed. But it's going to take us in this room, us on this phone call, to slowly help make those changes in order for it to be more acceptable. So we just have to be ready for that challenge. But I'm going to be quiet because I feel like for Black women, let's be very honest here, they probably have it the most difficult. So I'm going to be quiet.
Hi, this is Linda. I do think the environment, the cultures have changed a lot from when I first entered the corporate space. Everybody seemed to have to assimilate to what everyone else looked like. And really, we are trying to embrace diversity and differences. But one of the things that I try to do is have that conversation with my leadership team as well. So it's not just at the HR level, because again, we all bring our biases into the workplace. I remember having discussions with some of my VPs, and one of my African-American leaders said to me, female leaders, I don't think we should hire people that got tattoos all up their arms or on their neck. And, it's like, that is not our conversation. We want to bring the best and the brightest minds into this world, into our organization. And we do not want to discriminate against anyone, because I think when you do that, you're going to limit the places that your organization can go and the things you can achieve.
I say that's exactly right. And Linda, to continue to build on that point, there's something to be said for if you're able to bring your whole authentic self to work, then you could put more brain power towards the problems and projects that are put before you. If you have to put yourself into a box that is not your natural fit, that's mental fatigue. And that's just going to take away your ability to focus on all the problems and thus the solutions you would bring to the table. So yes, I am natural years now or so. And I love the fact that I literally spend 5 minutes on my hair in the morning coming to work. It's just like, it comes out of my head, I throw some leave-in on, and then I am out the door. And that's great. It's been wonderful. I have not had any issues personally or professionally in dealing with that. But I also think, as Linda said, it's a generationally changed in the last 15 years. So my career path has been around folks who have been trying to embrace their authentic self. And I'm so grateful that we can.
I echo all of those comments, especially here with my long braids today. So thank you all. Paul, I'm going to pass this question to you. As you are aware, all health systems and hospitals are focused on reducing and eliminating harm and harm events. This often includes root cause analysis and conversations with key stakeholders. I recently heard of the concept of doing something similar with missed opportunities with DE&I. How can organizations bring this concept to life in terms of how we treat our patients and team members, including missed opportunities with hiring and promotions?
So we're having more and more conversations around like DE&I leaders within healthcare organizations having a seat at the table. So they should be part of the C-suite conversations, reporting directly to the CEO, reporting directly to the board, because that's how you're able to make that progress. When you have those leaders in the room at the table, helping to push the conversation and to bring those issues to light, even around health disparities and what it means for the Black, Brown, and other communities, that's how you can help to begin to make some of those changes and bring awareness to it. Until you have those people in the room, if we talk about decision rights and people who are held accountable to those metrics, that's the only way you can be able to make true progress around that.
I just want to add that, I think we need to go just a little bit further, not only at the organization, but at our board of directors. Because, sometimes we have such a focus on what's happening in the organization, but then we have an oversight board that is going in a totally different direction, or they don't represent or look like the organization. So I think some of that training needs to also happen in discussions at the board of directors as well.
Thank you for sharing. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we have to end this conversation. 1 hour just wasn't long enough. Thank you again to our YPC Conference and Track co-chairs. Thank you again to FTI Consulting for sponsoring this event. I hope you found this conversation insightful and engaging. As a reminder, the YPC has a networking event tomorrow. If you are not yet registered, please email us at nasypc@gmail.com or visit our Instagram page to register. If you are not in the YPC, please visit nasy.org/YPC to sign up to our listserv. We are also looking to engage members to join our committee. Please reach out to us if interested. And please continue to enjoy this year's NASY conference. I look forward to seeing you all in person next year. Thank you.
Thank you.